What's up, YouTube fam? Robbie C here. Today we're out in Trustville and we are going to be discussing an all-important topic that you were looking for on the internet, and that is quite simply, how do I throw farther? And how do I throw farther as fast as possible? So I want to give you the two quick tips on that, but before we dive in, I have to ask the most important question. How are you doing today, Taylor? And specifically, Taylor Blay, we miss you and love you, brother.
So catch me if I fall.
All right, so we've all thought this, we've all wanted it before. You throw, let's say, 200 feet and you're trying to cross in the 250 range, throw 250, you want 300. I've always described distance as a sort of drug of sorts where we never get enough of it. I don't care how far you throw, almost every single person in the world, if you said, hey, if I could get you 50 more feet in one fieldwork session, would you be willing to take that? There are so many people that would answer yes, even our farthest throwers in the world. If I told Anthony Barella, hey, in one fieldwork session, I'm gonna be able to get you an extra 50 feet of distance, I still guarantee you his answer would be yes. But one of the biggest things about increasing distance thresholds that I think gets overlooked is it's not just about how far can I push a disc. The more we are able to push distances, the easier it becomes to throw slower speed options at shorter distances. So when our ceiling increases, getting to those different floors becomes even easier. I'm not a runner, I've got terrible knees, and honestly, I don't think I have the mental resolve to get into running because you're just like left alone with your thoughts for such a long amount of time. But I think of runners and almost the training that they have to go through is very similar to why we want to push these distance thresholds, right? If you are going to be running and training, if you can run 13 miles in practice, running a 5K feels like no problem at all. So I do think that there is a way or a reason to increase distance. And one of the best ways to go about that is via form change. If we really want to see long lasting effects or long lasting change, we have to be willing to sort of break down the form, which is what I did last year in terms of I tried to revamp my form from start to finish. And y'all, I legitimately think that, traumatizing is the right word. I hated disc golf for a long time during that season because I really felt like I had no control over the disc. When I threw a backhand, I had no idea where the disc was going to come out. And then we got injured, and so then we had to back off. We've relearned it. I'm starting to gain some confidence in knowing where the backhand's going to go again, but I'm able to push through those tiers faster. However, I was having a conversation with a friend who is part of the Birdie fam the other day, and it inspired this video. This conversation in particular started talking about the ozone. I had just gotten my ozones in from Jesse over at Trash Panda, and when I got my ozones, I literally was waiting at the door for the delivery man to deliver them so that I could take them out and film with them as soon as possible. Took them out to the course, used them, loved it. You've seen that video. I'll try to, if I remember, to link it here. But when I first unboxed the ozone package, when I got off the course, Ryan and his wife Abby were actually on the practice green, and I was telling him about how hype I was about this disc, about the ozone specifically. And so I actually gave Ryan one of the ozones, and I was like, hey, feel free to go check it out, because I know that Ryan throws in the like 280 to 300 foot range, and I thought this could be a disc that could easily push him over that threshold. And boy, to my surprise, was I shocked when Ryan told me at the end that the disc was unusable for him. Now I thought to myself, this really flippy disc that is phenomenal, and I wouldn't even describe it. I think that the flight numbers are a little off on the ozone. Instead of a -3.1, I think it's much more of a -2.1. So I really didn't think that it would be too crazy flippy. So I asked Ryan some questions. He kind of just talked about that he was putting too much on it. It was burning over, things like that. And he found a jet by, I believe it's Streamline. And he saw that he could throw it on a little bit of hyzer, almost half power, watch that thing stand up all the way, turn, and then come back and fight out at the end. What really sold Ryan over the edge was when he watched Jesse throw an ozone over 400 feet, and he realized it may be him, not the disc, that's, quote, unusable. So I've talked a lot, and I know that several of you, when you watch my videos, you're like, oh, he actually starts throwing or starts giving the tips at whatever. I'm a big setting the table guy. That's why you always see in all of my videos, the chapters at the beginning are setting the table, because I'm here to tell a story, here to bring you in, and I don't want to just chop up a tip or whatever and give it to you and get it pulled out of context. I want to set the table so that you all know what we're talking about. So I think there are two things that you can do to change how you approach the game, how you attack the game, and they're both very simple, But when they work together, it absolutely opens up the game in ways that I think a lot of players, especially if you're newer, may have never thought about. The first is quite simple, and it is disc selection. Choosing the correct disc can be the difference maker for you to really unlock certain distance thresholds. What do I mean by this? If I think about the discs that I have in my bag, I have 3 pigs that are currently in my bag. I've got my brand new, fresh, and honestly available at foundationdisc.com. If it's good, keep it in the bag pig. This is brand new R Pro pig. It's gonna fly pretty overstable. Next, I have straight pig that has seen better days, as you see. My friend Josh actually found this at New London because in a foundation video, I got so frustrated that for the second time of playing New London, hole 6, I had failed to throw, 2 different misses, but I had failed to get this pig over the final gap. And so I was just frustrated in mid-video and I just chucked this into the woods. Well, my friend Josh forgot a disc back on hole 6, and so he was running through the woods and actually came across it, knew it was mine, so got it returned to me. And of course, precious child. These 3 pigs, while all pigs, all are pro, accomplish different things because of their flights. This is brand new, overstable pig. You can see that it goes and it fades out. Now, straight pig has a little bit of a different flight. You can see it stands up to flat, it rides straight, and then it just falls at the very end. And last but not least, precious child. When I throw precious child, try and throw it the same way, it has turn to it. So I can see with all 3 of those, they land in a pattern across. Disc selection matters. I've chosen a pig on all of those, but because they're in different levels of wear and tear, they are going to fly entirely differently. Now, what does this mean for you? And maybe you don't have 3 pigs in your bag, but you've seen that Joe or Terry in your local disc golf scene throws an eagle. And he throws that eagle super far because the eagle has flight numbers of 7, 4, -1, 3. I've always described the eagle as being a more reactive T-bird. It has more turn to it than a T-bird traditionally has, but it has more fade than a T-bird also has. So if you've got Wes, the local crusher, in your group, and he's throwing eagles and exoduses and all those other eagle-like discs on a bunch of different lines, and he's flexing the eagle all over your face, you may grow up and want to be like Wes one day and throw super far. So you decide to take an eagle and put it in your bag. But instead of having an eagle do this, where it flies straight and then has a little bit of fade there at the end, eagles more realistically fly for you like they're fading the whole time. Super overstable, and it seems significantly more difficult for you to get distance out of that disc. Why is this the case? Because you may not be the big crusher like Wes is. You may not have the power to get that disc to fly. So for you, if you want that flight out of an eagle that actually has that straight flight, maybe you need to consider bagging an ozone that traditionally has more turn on it. But because of that, you're able to get it to hold straighter. Simply changing the disc that you're choosing could allow you to replicate or get those flights in either a different disc, same flight, or different disc, easier way to create that flight. Is it possible for me to take my felons and create similar flights to the straight shot of a seasoned eagle or what mushers are getting out of their eagles? Absolutely, that's very possible. Is it going to take more effort and cause me to throw sort of different lines with them? Absolutely, that's very possible. So instead of being fixated on, I want to replicate the same disc or the same opportunity that I'm seeing out of what other people are throwing, I may have to change the disc that I'm using. A great example of this is Foundation. When they see pros throw the buzz, they called it the people's buzz, which was not actually a buzz, it was a comet. So disc selection can be huge, but the problem is that let's say you want to go the route of throwing an ozone as an eagle alternative for you, because maybe you don't have the arm speed, or you don't have the power or the spin or the snap. There's a multitude of factors that make it so that you can't throw the eagle the way that other people, the big crushers in the world, are throwing the eagle. So how do I take the ozone and still use it correctly? Because maybe you're in Ryan's first look at the ozone and you're like, wow, this is just too flippy for me, which is confusing when you watch Jesse throw it over 400 feet and you're thinking to yourself, he can get that disc to be thrown at over 400 feet and I can't even throw 400 feet with any disc. So how is it usable for him, but it's not usable for me? I think this is the most interesting conundrum, because disc choice is one thing, but what if a disc is, quote, unusable? And I think that's where we got to talk about changing the angle that you throw it on. Now, when we talk about changing your angles, you need to first understand your stock angle, or what is your natural tendency of a shot. We'll use the Foundation Boys as examples for this, because I think amongst the three people that prominently show up on Foundation's channel, between Hunter, Trevor, and Connor, they actually find themselves on all three ends of the spectrum. For Hunter to throw a flat shot, or his stock shot, he is throwing something on hyzer. For those of you who are unfamiliar with hyzer is where the outside of the edge of the disc is down. This means on a backhand for right-handed players, it looks like this, and for a forehand, a stock angle on hyzer looks like this. Outside of the edge of the disc is down. The other end of the spectrum is where Trevor is, where his stock shot is an anhyzer, which means the outside edge of the disc is up. This is what it looks like on a right-handed backhand, and on a forehand, it's outside of the edge of the disc is up like so. And then of course you have Connor sort of living in the middle, which is much more of an actual flat release of the disc. That means on a backhand, it's looking like this. Forehand, it's looking flat like this. Now I'll go ahead and tell you that most people in the world do not actually throw flat. If they think they throw flat, they probably have a tendency one way or another. This has been one of the coolest things about tech disc, is seeing what actual release angles look like. So where does this come in for changing the angles? Just like with my pigs, I have 3 eagles in the bag. I have an understable to neutral eagle, I have a neutral to overstable, and then I have an overstable eagle. Now because of this, that means that they have to be thrown, if all 3 are thrown on the same angle, they're going to fly differently. And if I want to get similar flights out of all 3, I have to adjust them accordingly. Now I prefer to be the player who uses a stock angle, and for me, my stock angle has a decent amount of hyzer. So if I want something to fly understable, it has to be pretty understable, because my stock release angle is going to be on hyzer, and I need to get up and move all the way over. But for lots of people, trying to throw flat, trying to throw in that more neutral state, when they end up with overstable discs, like let's say this eagle, throwing it flat is going to cause the disc to actually fade out, but they're looking for a straight flight. So they're gonna naturally develop as they grab those faster discs in order to get them to fly straight and not just fade out and crash and finish and burn every single time. They're gonna start developing a little bit of an anhyzer angle, because if they want to throw the disc straight, you see how you can crank over on it. And even when you compare that to the first flight that I threw, the pink one finished way further left the first time than it did right there, because I threw it on a different angle. Ryan was one of those people who had a natural anhyzer angle release. Because he wasn't aware of that, in his mind, he was throwing flat shots for distance. He, by his own words, when we had this conversation, he was trying to throw golf shots over and over again. And in his mind, a golf shot was his stock angle shot. So taking an ozone and throwing it on anhyzer release, it's not a very useful shot, guys, because that's just burning over to the right. So what Ryan had to do is, when he realized Jesse was able to throw this, he realized, like Taylor says, it's me, hi, I'm the problem. So I want you to think about the angles that you like to naturally release a disc. And when you find that angle, you'll probably be able to put it side by side with the disc you have. As a great example, if you're someone who's constantly using the words, destroyers are too flippy for me, I need to find something with more beef, like a Saki Bomb General, you might be an anhyzer thrower, which is probably why when you got into the game and people thought that you should check out the Latitude 64 Diamond, you told everyone that disc is just too flippy for me. And it wasn't that you necessarily had this elite level distance power, the angle of which was natural for you was anhyzer, and so you were pulling discs over. On the other side of the coin, there are people that maybe come from an ultimate background like myself, where ultimate discs are naturally understable, so we were used to pulling everything on hyzer, and because of that, our natural angle, when we try to move up to destroyer, we have to find pretty flippy destroyers, because if your arm speed's just not really there right off the bat, it's gonna be really hard to get that disc all the way up to flat. So I grabbed two distance drivers to sort of demonstrate this point, because I think they are two wonderful distance drivers that people can grow into eventually. But I wanna showcase that while both of these are great discs, when you try to throw them the exact same way, one of them is always going to outshine the other depending on what that release angle is. Now, what are these two discs? I have the Sail by DGA and I have the Strive by Latitude 64. Two phenomenal discs. The Sail almost always tries to find its place back in the bag for me, and the Strive I think has the potential to be the disc of the year for 2024. As you can tell with these two discs side by side, the Sail should in theory be significantly flippier than the Strive. Because of this, let's look at what happens when we throw both of them flat side by side to see their flights. You're talking Robbie Crawford flat, which is going to be a little bit of hyzer, but I'm going to try to really focus in so that I can throw these as flat as humanly possible so you guys can get a good feel of this. You can see it just turns over its entire flight and it just continues moving right. Now, did that get some pretty great distance? It sure did, which is phenomenal. But that distance is really hard to aim, because if I know that it's going to turn that much over and I'm trying to throw straight down the fairway, I'm having to aim this way with my body, almost like a slice in golf, and I'm trying to play the slice all the way over. Now let's look at the Strive, which has different flight numbers, and try to throw it flat and see what it does. You can see that it turns very similar to the Sail, but it doesn't turn all the way over. This would be arguably a much easier to use disc when thrown flat. So we can already see the difference between those two. One seemed to get me easier distance in the Sail, but does that make it a better distance disc? It depends on what your natural angle is and what you feel comfortable with. So for our flat earthers or flat throwers or whatever kind of flat you want to claim, that is the difference that we see in these two already. But let's say the Sail, which if you want maximum distance potential, wants to be thrown on a lot of hyzer with some power, so that it has an opportunity to stand all the way up, have room to fade over, and maybe come back. The Strive, however, when thrown on the same line, probably isn't going to have a similar flight, because as you even saw trying to throw it flat, it's just not the same disc to try to get that easy movement. Once again, we'll go Sail first and try to yam it on some hyzer. Threw it super nose up and a ton of hyzer. And you can see that it instantly stood up. Even with me throwing it poorly and throwing it so nose up, it still got all the way up because it's that understable. But that much hyzer allowed me, it sort of auto-corrected itself. Now, if I throw this just as poorly, but on just as much hyzer, you can see that that Strive never had any intention of ever standing up. It just faded the entire time. And this could cause someone to make a comment such as, I don't think the Strive is that flippy. Or you'll have people that yam the Strive on and hyzer and they're like, the Strive is too flippy for me. Simply changing the release angle of the disc is going to dramatically shape how we view the disc, especially if we lock it into one angle. When we combine these two principles, I think about shots that I'm traditionally weak at, because you are going to learn the more you experiment with this. If you're willing to try out different discs and try them on a multitude of launch angles and multitude of release angles and things like that, you might actually find some really sneaky shot opportunities that you have. And I'll be the first to tell you, I only brought one Sail and one Strive to shoot this video. So every time that I rip them down there, I have to walk all the way down there and get them just to come back and shoot another shot for this. So is it the most time efficient thing? No. But let's say I did this with my entire bag and I was ripping my whole bag down there. Suddenly, it feels like a much better use of my time, and I'm learning to dial in my discs and see, are there angles that my discs actually give me that I didn't know I had before, because I'm willing to test and change the release angles. For instance, a shot that I know is a weakness of my game is that super high anhyzer backhand. I really struggled to throw force over flexes because of this, and because my natural choice of angle is that hyzer, that power hyzer, I have built a very neutral bag that also has extreme understable and extreme overstable. But I try to lock my bag down in the middle neutral area and kind of spread those things out for that reason. But because I know I struggle with that, if I grab my really flippy discs that are on the extreme understable side and I try to throw a flat shot with mine and throw it high, I seem to get a much better shot or better attempt at that turnover shot, that turnover anhyzer the entire way. And the only reason I know this is because I'm willing to get out there and experiment with my angles. It's going to show you that while you are trying to throw those golf shots or those consistent shots over and over again, that's fantastic to lock it in. But when we open up our mind and open up our attempting at the other angles, you're gonna be blown away at the distance potentials you unlock, as well as maybe there are discs that you wrote off in the past and suddenly become usable, or maybe there are discs in your bag that you've got sort of pigeonholed into one slot that are actually way more versatile. For instance, to try to showcase them one more time, these are both flippier discs, and because of that, people are most inclined to throw them on power backhands, and that's it. Because people are so afraid to throw understable stuff on forehand, lots of folks would never consider forehanding a disc like this. But if I find myself trapped and in a position where I have to throw sort of a standstill power forehand, having a really overstable disc to try to do that with is gonna feel extremely difficult. But if I choose to test my release angles, I can take this sail and throw it out and get a 300-foot standstill forehand out of it without even blinking, because I'm willing to mess with the angles. Now, when I grab the strive, I can try to put a little more on it, because the strive, in testing it, has more stability than the sail. So maybe there's room that I have both in the bag. These are just the opportunities that present themselves when you stop looking at everything as that disc is unusable, that disc is too difficult, that disc is too flippy, whatever it may be, and you start testing out your different options. What are my two easiest ways to hack distance? Look at the disc selection that you're using and look at the angles of which you're choosing to use those discs in. Changing those and working them around and adjusting them, especially with each other, I promise that you're going to see distance gains and shot shaping potential increases the more you adjust those. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and please make it fantastic for someone else too. If this was helpful, feel free to leave a comment down below and let me know if you agree with this, if you disagree with this. I would love to use the comment section as always for a healthy discussion. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. But for now, we are gonna leave you with the birdie.